I never meant to stay after class. Most of the time, I'd pack up my sheet music, nod politely, and leave before the silence got awkward. But that evening, the late light caught her profile, the thin line of her glasses, the way her hair brushed her cheek as she leaned over the keys. I stopped halfway to the door, notebook in my hand, not sure if she noticed I hadn't moved. She didn't look up. Her fingers rested on the piano, not pressing down, just hovering like she was deciding whether to play. "You keep counting in your head," she said finally. "That's why it sounds mechanical." I laughed, a little defensive. "Isn't that the point? To stay on time?" Her eyes met mine then, steady and calm. "Music isn't about time. It's about feeling." The words landed heavier than I expected. I shoved my hands in my pockets, trying not to stare at her rings glinting faintly in the dim light. She was older, mid-40s maybe, the kind of woman who carried her quiet like a second skin. I was 22 and still folding pizza boxes for a part-time job. There wasn't a reason for her to linger on me, yet sometimes I caught her pauses stretching just a little too long. We'd first met in the corner of a used bookstore downtown. She was stacking through sheet music, frowning softly at the torn edges. I was pretending to browse, but when she asked the clerk about piano lessons, I heard my own voice break in. "You teach?" She studied me with a quick up-and-down glance before nodding. "If you're serious." I wasn't, not really. But I gave her my number anyway. A week later, I was sitting in her small practice room above the shop, listening to the faint creak of pipes as she corrected my fingering. By the third lesson, I'd started noticing things I shouldn't have. The chipped mug she always filled with green tea. How she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was trying not to laugh at my mistakes. The quiet humming she did when she thought I wasn't listening. And then there was me, carrying silence like it was a second instrument. I'd scroll to old texts on my phone during breaks, thumb hovering over names I'd never send messages to. Friends busy, mother worried, ex-girlfriend long gone. I told myself I was fine, that I liked the space, but sometimes the room felt too large when I walked back alone. That evening, after she said those words about feeling, I wanted to ask her what she meant. I wanted to admit I didn't know how to play anything without hiding behind rhythm and rules. Instead, I just nodded and sat back down, fingers clumsy against the ivory. She moved closer, watching me play. Her hand brushed the side of the piano, inches from mine. I noticed the faint line where her wedding ring must have once been, though she never mentioned it. My eyes flicked there once, twice, before I forced them back to the keys. "Slower," she said softly. "Listen before you play." I tried again, letting the notes breathe. She didn't correct me this time. She only leaned back, arms crossed lightly, and let the silence stretch. It wasn't awkward. It was something else. When I finally packed my notebook and stood to leave, she surprised me. "Next week," she said, almost casual. "Come 15 minutes early. I want to show you something." Her eyes stayed on mine for a moment longer than necessary. I walked down the narrow staircase with my heart unsteady, my phone buzzing in my pocket from a message I didn't check. All I could think was, what exactly did she want to show me? I arrived 15 minutes early, like she'd asked. The stairwell smelled faintly of dust and rain. It had rained that morning, and the hallway light buzzed overhead. For a second, I thought about turning back. I didn't want to look like I was too eager. But then her door opened before I could knock. "You're here," she said, almost surprised, though she was the one who invited me. She held a mug in her hand, steam curling up past her face. "I was around," I lied. My palms felt too empty. She stepped aside to let me in. The room looked different in daylight, stacks of sheet music spilling from the shelves, a potted plant tilted toward the window, half-drunk teacups on the desk. It felt less like a classroom and more like someone's living room. Her living room. Instead of sitting at the piano, she pulled another chair over, motioning for me to sit. "I wanted you to hear something first." She pressed play on an old CD player. A Chopin nocturne filled the room, delicate and aching. She leaned back, closing her eyes, almost forgetting I was there. My father used to play this, she said finally, voice softer now. I hated practicing when I was your age. He'd sit in the kitchen and smoke, just listening. Never corrected me. Just listened. I nodded, though my throat felt tight. It was the first real thing she'd shared with me. Something not in the lesson plan. Something personal. I wanted to tell her about my dad too, how he'd left when I was 14, how I still replayed our last conversation in my head when I couldn't sleep. But the words stayed in my mouth. Instead, I said, "You play better than the recording." She laughed once, short and embarrassed, tucking her hair behind her ear. That's kind of you, but no. The silence stretched again, heavy but not uncomfortable. My eyes drifted to her hands resting on her lap, slim fingers that had guided mine on the keys more times than I could count. I imagined them closing over mine again. The thought startled me, and I looked away too quickly. That's when it hit me, how wrong this could be. She was twice my age. My old classmates would laugh, maybe worse. Her reputation, her career, whatever quiet life she'd built here, it could all unravel. And yet, sitting in that small room with her, all I wanted was to stay. "Tea?" she asked suddenly, standing up before I could answer. She poured some into a second mug and slid it across the desk toward me. Our fingers brushed as I reached for it. A small thing, nothing really. But the warmth of it lingered longer than the tea itself. She didn't look up when it happened. Neither did I. But later, when I was lying in bed replaying the day, that tiny contact became the whole memory. I don't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. The next lesson didn't feel like the others. Maybe because I couldn't stop thinking about her hand brushing mine, or maybe because she seemed quieter. She kept giving me notes, but her eyes never stayed on me for long. "Try again," she said, voice steady. But she stood farther away this time, arms folded, as if the space between us was suddenly necessary. I played a few bars, stumbled, cursed under my breath. Normally she would laugh, tease me, lean closer. Today, just a soft, slower, like she didn't want to give too much. When I looked up, she was staring out the window. Halfway through, a knock rattled the door. She startled, then pressed a finger to her lips as if I needed reminding. She opened it only a crack. "Oh, hey!" A man's voice. Middle-aged. Familiar in a way that made my chest tighten. "Hi," she said, too bright. "What are you doing here?" "I was just in the area." His tone casual, but I caught something else. I stared at the sheet music, pretending not to listen, but my ears strained anyway. They spoke a few low words. Then the door shut, the lock sliding softly. She exhaled, set her back against the wood, eyes closed a moment too long. "Sorry. Where were we?" I nodded like it didn't matter. But it did. For the rest of the hour, I played almost without hearing. My mind kept circling. Who was he? A friend? More? Her past? Her present? She noticed, of course. "You're distracted," she said finally. I shook my head too quickly. "I'm fine." Her eyes lingered. Not convinced. Then, gently, "Sometimes it's better not to force it." We sat in silence. The CD player hummed faintly, a mechanical whir. She sipped her tea. I folded and unfolded the corner of a page until it tore off in my hand. There were 1,000 questions I could have asked. None of them felt possible. When the lesson ended, I didn't stand right away. She didn't move either. The space between us felt charged, the air too still. "You're getting better," she said softly. "Even when you don't hear it yet." Something in her eyes, warm, almost proud, made my chest ache. I wanted to tell her what it meant to have someone say that. How long it had been since anyone noticed. Instead, I just looked back, words failing me. Her hand lifted, like she meant to touch my shoulder. She stopped halfway, fingers curling against her palm. I leaned a fraction closer without meaning to. My breath caught. Her eyes flicked to mine, then down to my mouth. And just like that, the sound of footsteps in the hall snapped it all. Someone passing by, keys jangling. The spell broke. She dropped her hand, stood too quickly. Next week, she said, already gathering papers. I left with my pulse hammering, my throat dry. We hadn't crossed the line. But we'd found the edge. It was raining again, thin needles against the street. The lesson had ended early, neither of us said why, and we left the building together. She carried her umbrella. I didn't. Without a word, she tilted it slightly toward me, just enough to keep my shoulder dry. We walked like that for half a block, pressed too close, our arms brushing when the wind shoved the umbrella sideways. Neither of us adjusted. "You've been quiet lately," she said finally. "So have you," I answered. She gave a faint smile, one that didn't reach her eyes. "I suppose I have." We stopped at a bench under a street lamp. The rain softened here, but the pavement glistened. She sat first, folding her hands in her lap. I hesitated, then lowered myself beside her. For a long moment, we listened to the rain. "About the other day," she began, then stopped. I looked at her. "The man?" Her jaw tightened. She nodded once. "Just a friend. An old friend. Nothing more." I wanted to believe her. Or maybe I wanted not to care. But the truth pressed up anyway, rough and unshaped. It bothered me. She turned to me sharply, startled. I swallowed. "I didn't like how it felt. Hearing you laugh like that. With him." The words sounded childish once they left me, but they were already in the air. I expected her to correct me, to remind me what this was, lessons, nothing else. Instead, she sighed, long and tired. "You're not supposed to notice things like that," she said. "I can't help it." Her hands unclasped, fingers restless against her knees. She stared at the rain. "You're 22, she said softly, almost to herself. "And I should know better." I wanted to answer, but she cut in, her voice sharper this time. "You don't know what you want yet." "Not really. I know when something feels right," I said. The words surprised me with their steadiness. Her head turned, eyes locking on mine. The lamplight caught in them, sharp and wet. The silence stretched. My pulse thudded against my throat. She looked away first, laughing once without humor. "This is reckless," she whispered. And still, the unfinished thought hung between us, louder than anything either of us had said. Her shoulder brushed mine again. This time she didn't move. I wanted to reach for her hand, to erase the small gap she was still holding onto. My fingers twitched, useless, caught between wanting and restraint. Her breathing shifted, a little unsteady. She turned halfway toward me, as if the umbrella wasn't wide enough for both of us anymore. Our faces were closer than they should have been. "Why do you keep coming back?" she asked finally. Her voice was soft, but the question hit like a stone dropped in water, rippling, widening, impossible to ignore. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Not yet. The next week, I showed up at the usual time. Knocked. Waited. Nothing. I knocked again, softer this time. Still no answer. The hallway felt too quiet, the hum of the fluorescent light buzzing louder than it should. Finally, I left. Told myself she must have forgotten, or been caught up somewhere else. But the next day, when I passed the shop below her place, the lights upstairs were on. Curtains drawn. She hadn't forgotten. She just didn't open the door. 3 days later, my phone buzzed with a single message. "No lessons this week." Something came up. No explanation. No suggestion of reschedule. Just a period at the end of the sentence. I stared at it too long. Typed out "Are you okay?" Deleted it. Tried "Did I do something?" Deleted that too. Eventually I left the thread blank, unread on purpose. That night, I scrolled through old messages from her. Mostly times, dates, the occasional short reminder to bring certain pieces. Nothing special. But I kept reading them like there might be something hidden underneath. When she finally called me back, her voice was different. Too light, like someone putting on a coat that doesn't quite fit. "I'm sorry," she said. "I should have told you earlier. My daughter's home for a few weeks. She's visiting from university." Daughter. The words sank in slowly. She had never mentioned her before. "That's great," I said, forcing cheer into my tone. "Family time's important." There was a pause. I thought I heard her sigh. Or maybe it was static. "Yes. Important." The following week, I didn't go. Even though she hadn't cancelled. I walked past the street twice, lingering at the corner like a coward. I imagined her inside, maybe laughing with her daughter over tea, maybe telling stories she'd never tell me. I kept moving. Pretended I had somewhere else to be. At home, the piano keys waited. I touched them but didn't press. The room felt flat without her voice, without her hand guiding mine. I typed another message. "I'll come by next week, if that's okay." Watched the words blink on the screen. My thumb hovered over send. Then I locked the phone and set it face down. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused. Like life forgot to finish the sentence. And in that pause, everything seemed louder: the empty chair across from me, the silence between notes, the faint echo of her voice saying music isn't about time. But I still didn't send the message. Not yet. I hadn't planned to see her. I was just walking home from work, the late shift, when I noticed her light on through the thin curtains. It was almost midnight. Before I could talk myself out of it, I climbed the steps and knocked. The pause before the door opened felt like a lifetime. Then she appeared, hair loose, glasses off, a cardigan pulled tight around her shoulders. She looked surprised, but not angry. Just tired. "You shouldn't," she began, but the words trailed away. "I know," I said. Silence pressed between us. The kind that demanded something. "Come in," she said finally. Her kitchen was small, warm from the kettle still humming on the counter. 2 mugs waited, already half filled with tea, as if she'd been expecting someone. She caught me looking at them and smiled faintly. "My daughter left earlier," she explained. "The house feels too quiet." We sat across from each other at the table. The steam from the mugs curled into the air, dissolving before it reached the ceiling. I folded and unfolded my hands against the wood grain. "I thought you were done with lessons," I said. "I thought so too." She looked down at her tea. "It felt easier to stop before." She stopped again, searching for words she didn't want to say. "Before what?" I asked softly. Her eyes lifted to mine. They didn't waver. "Before I started wanting something I shouldn't." The words landed and sat there. No explanation needed. I felt my chest tighten, not with triumph, not even relief. Just the weight of knowing she had been carrying the same thing I had. "You think I don't feel it too?" My voice shook more than I wanted. She leaned back, almost recoiling, as if the honesty itself burned. "You're so young. You have everything ahead of you. I'm not supposed to be part of that. Maybe I get to decide that," I said. It came out sharper than intended, but I didn't take it back. Her mouth opened, closed. She let out a sound that wasn't quite a laugh. "You don't know how much it terrifies me. Wanting to say yes. Wanting to let this." She stopped, pressing her hand flat against the table. I stared at that hand. Wanted to cover it with mine. But I didn't. "Not yet." Instead, I said quietly, "I don't care if it's reckless. I just don't want to pretend it isn't there anymore." Her eyes softened, and for the first time, she didn't look away. The silence that followed wasn't sharp now. It felt heavy, but shared. Finally, she reached across the table. Not fast, not dramatic. Just a small gesture, her fingers brushing the back of my hand. I turned my palm upward, letting her rest there. Either of us spoke. We didn't need to. Her hand in mine said enough. "Okay," she whispered. It didn't happen all at once. Nothing ever does. We still met for lessons, though they were less about music and more about moments. Sometimes she'd correct my fingering, Sometimes she just let me play wrong, smiling faintly when I stumbled but kept going. Her daughter went back to university. The apartment grew quiet again. And somehow, I became part of that quiet, not as a student, not as anything official, just there. We stopped naming what it was. It didn't need a label. One Saturday morning, I found her already waiting at the bench outside the shop, umbrella hooked over her arm even though the sky was clear. She had a thermos of tea, poured half into a paper cup, and handed it to me like it was the most natural thing. "Too hot," she warned. I took a sip anyway, burning my tongue, and she laughed. The sound was small, ordinary, but I carried it with me the whole day. There were doubts, of course. Whispers in my head about the years between us, the what-ifs, the looks from people who noticed when we walked too close together. She worried too. I saw it in the way she sometimes pulled her hand back a second too soon, or how she changed the subject when conversation drifted toward the future. But slowly those pauses softened. It wasn't about erasing the fear. It was about carrying it and still choosing to stay. One evening, after we'd played through Chopin again, I asked if she missed her father. She looked at the piano for a long time before answering. "Every day. But I think he would have liked you." I didn't know what to say to that. So I just nodded, and for once, words weren't needed. Life didn't turn into something cinematic. I still worked late shifts. She still had mornings filled with errands and old students who remembered her differently. But there was tea waiting when I knocked. And sometimes, she'd text me at exactly 8:47 a.m., a picture of the rain outside her window, just because she knew I'd understand. Looking back, I can't point to the moment it became love. Maybe it was the umbrella tilting toward me in the rain. Maybe it was her hand brushing mine in that cramped kitchen. Or maybe it was something smaller, the way she always paused before correcting me, as if weighing whether it was worth breaking the silence. All I know is, somewhere between those pauses, I found a place I hadn't realized I'd been missing. And when I sat beside her on that same bench months later, shoulder to shoulder, sipping tea that had cooled too fast, I thought, music isn't about time. It's about feeling. And this felt right. Did this story stay with you? What kind of quiet, real love stories do you want to hear next?